My name is Olivia Harrison. I'm 34 years old. And the strange thing about the moment your life quietly falls apart is that it never sounds like a disaster when it begins. There's no music, no breaking glass, no voice in the back of your mind telling you, pay attention. This is it. Sometimes, it starts with something as small as a text message you weren't supposed to receive. If you had asked me a week before everything unraveled, I would have told you I had a good life. Not perfect, but stable. Predictable in the way people mistake for safe. Ethan Cole and I had been together for 6 years. We weren't married, not officially, but we lived like we were. Shared bills, shared routines, shared a daughter, Lily, who had just turned 7 and still believed the world made sense if you asked enough questions. Ethan was 38, quiet, reliable, the kind of man who didn't say much but always showed up. Or at least, that's what I believed. He worked in project management, long hours, constant deadlines, just enough stress to explain the late nights and the occasional weekend conference. I never questioned it, because trust doesn't break all at once. It erodes slowly, silently, until one day there's nothing left underneath it. His mother, Margaret Cole, was involved. That's the word people use when they don't want to say too involved. She called often, stopped by without notice, knew things about Ethan's schedule before I did. But she was always kind to me, warm, supportive. She used to tell people I was the daughter she never had. I used to believe that meant something. And then there was Sophie Bennett, Ethan's coworker, the one he always described with a soft shrug and an easy smile. Just a friend. She's going through a lot. She's basically like a sister. I remember the first time he said that. I remember thinking how kind that sounded, how reassuring, how normal, funny, the things you remember later, the details that feel harmless until they're not. The night everything changed was quiet. Lily was upstairs, brushing her teeth and arguing with herself in the mirror about whether she needed to floss. Ethan was helping her, his voice drifting down the hallway in that soft, patient tone he always used with her. I was sitting on the couch, half watching something I wasn't really paying attention to, scrolling through my phone the way people do when they're trying to unwind without actually thinking. That's when the message came through. Margaret. I smiled automatically when I saw her name. That reflex, familiar, unguarded, would be gone in less than 60 seconds. I opened the message, and for a moment, my brain refused to process what I was reading. Don't forget to delete the hotel charge before Olivia sees the statement. Call me after your meeting with Sophie tomorrow. Love you. I stared at the screen. Read it again, and again, each time hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something that made sense, something harmless. They didn't, because the problem with the truth is that once you see it clearly, you can't unsee it. Margaret hadn't meant to send that to me. That much was obvious. She meant to send it to Ethan, which meant this wasn't new. This wasn't a mistake. This was routine, planned, understood, shared. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat there completely still, feeling something inside me shift, like a foundation cracking beneath a house that still looked perfectly fine from the outside. Footsteps echoed from upstairs, Lily laughing, Ethan saying something I couldn't quite make out. Life continuing, like nothing had happened. I locked my phone, set it down beside me, and waited. When Ethan came downstairs, he looked exactly the same. Same tired expression, same loosened tie, same gentle smile when he saw me. Hey, he said, she finally agreed to floss. I smiled back, because somehow that felt easier than the truth. Good, I said softly. Proud of her. He leaned down, kissed the top of my head like he always did. Routine, familiar, normal. And I wondered, how many times had he done that after being with her? That night, I didn't confront him. I didn't ask questions, because instinct told me something my heart wasn't ready to accept yet. This wasn't something you react to. This was something you prepare for. I went upstairs, tucked Lily into bed, kissed her forehead. Love you, Mommy, she whispered sleepily. I love you more. And I meant it in a way that suddenly felt sharper, more urgent, like love had just become something I needed to protect. Then I got into bed beside Ethan, turned off the light, listened to his breathing even out as he fell asleep, and stared into the dark. I didn't sleep. Not really. My mind kept circling the same question over and over again. How long? The next morning, after Ethan left for work like nothing had changed, I started looking for answers. And that's when everything stopped being a suspicion and became something much worse. A pattern. I called my best friend, Claire, told her everything, every word of the message, every detail I didn't want to believe. She didn't hesitate. Check everything, she said. Bank statements, phone records, all of it. I already knew that, but hearing it out loud made it real. So I started with the credit cards, scrolled back 6 months, then further and further. Hotels, restaurants, weekend charges I didn't recognize, dates that lined up perfectly with every excuse he'd ever given me. Work trip, late meeting, visiting mom. Every lie had a receipt. Every receipt told a story, and none of them included me. I kept going. 1 year, 2, 3, 5. 5 years. 5 years of hotel rooms. 5 years of dinners for two. 5 years of a life I had no idea existed. I sat there, staring at the screen, my hands completely still. Because at some point, it stopped hurting and started making sense. This wasn't an affair, not the kind people recover from, not the kind you explain away as a mistake. This was a second life, built carefully, maintained deliberately, protected by the one person who was supposed to protect me too. I whispered it out loud, not because I needed to hear it, but because I needed to accept it. How long? My voice barely made a sound. Have they both been lying to me? And for the first time since the message came through, I felt something stronger than shock, stronger than grief. Clarity. Because now I knew exactly what I was dealing with and what I was going to do next. The strange thing about certainty is that once it settles in your bones, fear starts to lose its grip. Not all at once, not enough to keep your hands from shaking, not enough to stop your chest from tightening every time you replay a lie in your head, but enough to make one thing clear. I was not crazy. I was not overreacting. I was not about to destroy something good. There was nothing good left to destroy. I spent the rest of that morning building a timeline. I worked in silence, sitting at the kitchen table where Ethan and I had eaten dinner the night before, where Lily had done spelling homework, where ordinary life had kept happening while mine was quietly being autopsied. The evidence was everywhere once I knew where to look. Same hotel chain, same part of town, same pattern. A charge in the afternoon, a restaurant that evening, sometimes breakfast the next morning. The dates lined up with conferences that never existed. Client dinners I had never heard about until 5 minutes before he supposedly had to leave. Weekend visits to Margaret's house when she had smiled and said, "Oh, Olivia, you should have come too." I sat there staring at those charges, and what hurt most was not even the sex. It was the choreography, the planning, the normalcy of it. The fact that he had built deception into the architecture of our life and still come home asking what I wanted for dinner. By noon, I pulled our phone records. The account was under my name. Ethan always said I was better with administrative things, and I used to think that meant we were a team. Now it just meant he'd been careless enough to cheat inside a system I could access. Sophie's number was everywhere. Morning calls during his commute. Short calls at lunch. Late night bursts after I'd gone upstairs with Lily. A rhythm so consistent it almost looked professional. Except people do not call coworkers 47 times a week for 5 years unless there is something far more intimate than work being exchanged between them. There were thousands of texts. I couldn't see the content. I didn't need to. Volume is its own confession. Frequency is its own betrayal. And 5 years of obsession leaves a fingerprint no excuse can erase. Around 1 in the afternoon, I stopped pretending I needed more proof. I didn't. What I needed was confirmation. Not for the affair, for Margaret. Because somehow that hurt in a different place. A deeper one. Ethan betraying me was horrifying. His mother helping him do it felt contaminating. Like finding rot in the walls of a house you thought was safe. I stared at her name for a long time before I called. She picked up on the second ring. "Olivia, honey," she said warmly, like she always did. "I was just thinking about you." My hand tightened around the phone. "You texted me by mistake yesterday." Silence. Not confusion. Not surprise. Silence. The kind that tells you the truth before a single word is spoken. "Margaret," I said, and my voice sounded colder than I felt. "How long have you known about Sophie?" A breath. Then another. "Olivia, how long? Can we talk about this in person?" "No." My voice sharpened. "No, we can't. You're going to answer me now." More silence. I stood from the table and walked to the sink because suddenly I couldn't breathe sitting down. "How long have you known your son has been cheating on me?" When she answered, her voice was quieter. Smaller, but not ashamed enough. "Since the beginning." The kitchen tilted. Not literally, but enough that I had to grip the counter with my free hand. "Since the beginning," I repeated. "Yes. 5 years. Not suspicion. Not maybe. Not I found out recently and didn't know how to tell you. Since the beginning." She had known from day one. Every holiday. Every birthday. Every Sunday dinner where she hugged me and asked about Lily and called me family. Every time I thanked her for being there for us. Every time she looked me in the eye. She had known. I don't remember ending the call. I remember the floor. Cold tile beneath my legs. My back against the cabinet. my hand over my mouth because the sound coming out of me didn't even feel human. I cried for 20 minutes, maybe longer. Not delicate crying, not movie crying. The kind that drags itself out of you in waves so violent they make your ribs ache. I cried for the version of my life I had been living inside. I cried for every moment that now looked different in hindsight. I cried because humiliation is a private kind of pain, and there is nothing quite like realizing other people have been managing your ignorance for years. And then, because grief has a limit when clarity arrives, I stood up, washed my face, sat back down at the table, and called a lawyer. Her name was Denise Walker. Calm voice, efficient, no wasted words. By the end of the call, I had a consultation scheduled for Monday morning and a list of documents to print. Bank records, phone records, screenshots, property paperwork, anything tied to custody, anything tied to shared finances, anything tied to Lily. That was the moment this stopped being emotional chaos and became strategy. Because heartbreak may be personal, but survival is procedural. All afternoon, I moved through the house like I was preparing for a storm only I could see. I printed statements, saved screenshots, forwarded records to a new email address Ethan didn't know about. I made copies of everything and put them in a folder labeled taxes, because betrayal has a way of teaching you small, practical paranoia. At 4:30, I picked Lily up from school. At 5:15, I helped her with homework. At 6, I made pasta. At 6:32, my life walked through the front door, and it did not walk in alone. Margaret came in first. Not by much, just enough for me to see it, for me to understand immediately what had happened. She had called him, warned him. They had decided to come together, a united front, as if I were the problem they needed to manage, as if this were a conversation about my emotions instead of their choices. Ethan stepped in behind her, face tight, jaw set, eyes flicking toward me and then away. "We need to talk," he said. I was standing in this kitchen doorway, dish towel in my hands, the domesticity of the moment so absurd it almost made me laugh. "About what?" I asked evenly. "About how you've been sleeping with your coworker for 5 years? Or about how your mother has been helping you hide it?" Margaret took a step forward immediately, palms slightly raised. "Now, Olivia, let's all calm down." I turned to her so fast she stopped talking. "Don't." The word cut through the room. Lily was upstairs, door closed, cartoon playing. I had made sure of that 10 minutes earlier because some part of me had known. I looked back at Ethan. He looked pale. "Good. You brought her here?" I asked. "Really?" "Mom was worried," he said. I laughed then. A short, disbelieving sound that didn't belong to me. Worried about what? That I found out? That the woman who's been helping you cheat finally texted the wrong person? "Olivia," Margaret said, voice trembling now, "this is complicated." "No, it isn't." I took a step closer. "It's actually very simple. You had an affair with Sophie for 5 years. Your mother knew. Your mother helped. That's not complicated. That's disgusting." Ethan ran a hand over his face. "Please don't do this in front of..." "In front of your mother?" I snapped. "The same mother who sent you reminders to hide hotel charges from me? The same mother who gave you alibis while I sat at dinner with her acting like family?" Margaret straightened at that, some old instinct for authority settling over her features. I was protecting my son. I stared at her, and in that moment, something inside me went cold. Not angry, not shattered, just cold. "From what?" I asked quietly. "Consequences?" She opened her mouth, but I didn't let her answer. "From honesty? From his own vows to me? From having to choose between his girlfriend and the family he built?" "He was trying to figure things out," she said. I actually blinked. "Figure things out?" "Yes." "For 5 years?" Her face tightened, but she kept going, because people like Margaret always mistake persistence for righteousness. "He didn't want to hurt anyone." I looked at Ethan. Finally. Directly. And yet somehow he found a way to hurt everyone. He sank onto the edge of the couch like his legs had given out. "I love you," he said. "I love Lily. This thing with Sophie, it's separate." Separate. I can still hear the word. Still feel the way it hit me. Separate, as if you can split betrayal into neat compartments. Separate, as if hotel rooms and lies and another woman's voice filling his nights had somehow happened in a sealed chamber untouched by the life we shared. "It doesn't affect us," he added weakly. I think that was the moment whatever remained of my grief turned into contempt. "It doesn't affect us?" I repeated. My voice was soft now, which made both of them look at me harder. "You spent 5 years living 2 lives, 5 years spending our money on her, 5 years lying to my face, 5 years coming home to me after being with someone else. And your mother sat across from me at family dinners, knowing exactly what you were doing. Margaret interrupted. I was trying to keep this family together. I turned on her. No, you were keeping his options open. Her mouth fell shut. You didn't protect a family. You protected your son from having to face what he was doing. You gave him cover. You gave him permission. You made it easier for him to betray me. That's not fair, she said. Fair? I stepped closer again, dish towel still clenched in my hand like it was the only proof I had that this was still my kitchen, my house, my life. Do you know what isn't fair? Loving people who laugh with you, eat with you, hold your child, and then go behind your back for 5 years while pretending they're decent. Ethan stood up then, maybe because he saw where this was going. This isn't Mom's fault. I looked at him with a kind of disbelief that felt almost calm. No? Then how many times did you tell me you were at her house when you were really with Sophie? He didn't answer. I looked at Margaret. How many times did you lie directly to my face? I never lied, she said too quickly. I let the silence after that stretch between us until it became unbearable. Then I said, you texted him hotel reminders? Her eyes dropped. That is lying. Nobody said anything. The room was so quiet I could hear Lily laughing faintly upstairs at something on TV. That sound nearly broke me. Because children have no idea when the ground under them is about to split. Ethan sat back down and put his head in his hands. I don't know how to fix this, he muttered, and I believed him. Because there are some things that cannot be repaired once the shape of them is fully revealed. You can't, I said. Both of them looked up. You don't fix 5 years. I set the dish towel down carefully on the counter. You don't fix an affair that lasted long enough to become a lifestyle. You don't fix your mother helping you hide it. You don't fix all the times you let me stand in a room and be the only person who didn't know the truth. Margaret's eyes filled with tears, but even then, she still sounded offended. So that's it? You're just throwing everything away? I almost smiled. The audacity of that question. I'm not throwing anything away, I said. You all did that a long time ago. I'm just refusing to keep living inside it. Ethan looked at me then in a way I had never seen before. Not angry. Not defensive. Scared. Olivia. No. I held up a hand. No speeches, no excuses, no, it didn't mean anything. No, I was confused. You do not get confusion after 5 years. You get accountability. Margaret started crying, openly now. You're destroying this family. And there it was. The line people like her always use when the lie stops working. I met her eyes. No, I said. Your son destroyed this family 5 years ago. You just helped him hide it. Ethan flinched. Good. I pointed toward the stairs. Lily is upstairs. She is not going to watch this turn uglier than it already has. So here's what's going to happen. My voice didn't shake. That surprised even me. You are going to pack a bag tonight and leave. Ethan stared at me. This is my house too. Actually, no, I said. It's in my name. My parents helped with the down payment. You can fight me about the rest through lawyers. Margaret inhaled sharply. I didn't look at her. You'll be getting formal paperwork next week. Olivia, please, Ethan said, standing again now. Don't do this tonight. I held his gaze. Tonight is the first honest night we've had in 5 years. That landed. I saw it. The slight drop in his shoulders. The tiny flicker in his face that said he knew, finally, that whatever version of me he thought would bend around this no longer existed. You're not taking Lily from me, he said. I'm protecting her from chaos, I replied. You can be her father, but Sophie is not part of her life, and neither is your mother. Margaret's head jerked up. You can't keep me from my granddaughter. I looked at her fully then. For the first time, not as Ethan's mother, not as Lily's grandmother, just as a woman who had looked at another woman's pain and decided it was an acceptable price for her son's comfort. Watch me. She stared at me as if I had slapped her. That's cruel. No, I said. Cruel was helping him betray me for 5 years and then expecting access to my child like you're the injured party. Ethan whispered my name again, but there was nothing left in it. Nothing I wanted. Pack a bag, I said. He stood there for a second longer, then nodded once. Slowly, like a man walking into the first consequence of his adult life. He went upstairs. Margaret stayed where she was, crying quietly. I didn't comfort her. I didn't look away either. Because sometimes the only dignity left is refusing to protect the people who never protected you. A few minutes later, Ethan came back down with a suitcase. He looked older, smaller somehow, as if truth had taken something out of him. I'll get the rest later, he said. Take your mother with you. Margaret blinked. I wasn't planning to leave. I finally let some of the fury show. I don't care what you were planning. You are not staying in my house. I'm his mother, and I was family too. That shut her up. For 5 years, you watched me build a life with your son while you helped him build another one behind my back. You do not get to stand in my kitchen and act wounded now. Get out. Ethan touched her arm gently. Mom, come on. She looked at him, devastated, as if she still couldn't understand why all of this was happening to her. And maybe that was the worst part. People who enable destruction always think consequences are cruelty. They left together, just like they had come. A united front on the way in, a broken one on the way out. I locked the door behind them and stood there with my hand on the knob for a long time. The house was silent again. Too silent. Upstairs, Lily was still awake, still innocent, still mine to protect. And downstairs, in the quiet they had left behind, one thought settled into me with the force of something final. He didn't betray me once. He chose betrayal over and over and over again. And his mother chose it too. I turned off the kitchen light, looked up toward the stairs, and understood with terrifying clarity that this was no longer about heartbreak. It was about war. War doesn't always look like shouting. Sometimes it looks like paperwork. The divorce papers were filed on Monday. No hesitation. No second guessing. No late night spiral of what if I'm being too harsh. Because by then, harsh had already been done to me. For 5 years. Ethan tried calling. I didn't answer. He tried again. And again. Voicemail after voicemail stacking up like apologies he should have made years ago. I blocked his number by Tuesday afternoon. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. There was nothing left to discuss that didn't belong in a courtroom. Margaret called too. I blocked her faster. But silence doesn't stay clean for long. By Wednesday, Ethan's father reached out. Richard Cole. Measured. Calm. The kind of man who always sounded reasonable, even when what he was saying wasn't. Olivia, he said, Margaret told me what happened. I'm sure she did. I think you might be overreacting. I actually closed my eyes when he said that. Not because it hurt. Because it confirmed something I had already begun to understand. This wasn't just Ethan. It wasn't just Margaret. It was a system. A family that protected itself at the expense of truth. Your son had a 5-year affair, I said evenly. Your wife helped him hide it. And you think I'm overreacting? She was trying to keep the family together by helping him tear it apart. A pause. She loves him. And I loved him too, I said. I just didn't lie for him. He sighed. People make mistakes. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. This was a 5-year pattern. You're punishing her for loving her son. I sat up then, my voice sharpening for the first time. No, I'm holding her accountable for helping him cheat on me. Those are not the same thing. He didn't have an answer for that, so he hung up. By Friday, it wasn't just calls. It was messages. Ethan's sister, his brother, even a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. All variations of the same script. You're being too extreme. She's still Lily's grandmother. Families work through things. Men make mistakes. That one almost made me laugh. Men make mistakes, as if betrayal were a gendered inevitability instead of a personal decision. I gave them all the same response, word for word. He had an affair for 5 years. Your mother helped him. Those are choices, and I'm making mine. Not everyone disagreed. My mother drove over that weekend with groceries I didn't need, and silence I did. She didn't ask questions, didn't push, just stood in my kitchen, unpacking things slowly, like she was helping me rebuild something invisible. After a while, she said quietly, I always thought Margaret was too involved in your relationship. I looked at her. Now we know why. My father was less subtle. Good riddance, he said, to both of them. My younger sister just stared at me like she couldn't quite process it. She helped him? She asked. Like, actively? Yes. Her face hardened in a way I hadn't seen before. That's not betrayal, she said. That's something worse. I didn't argue, because I didn't have a better word for it either. The first court date was 2 weeks later, and if the confrontation in my living room had been emotional, this was clinical. Ethan sat across from me, suited, composed, like this was just another negotiation. Margaret sat behind him. Of course she did. Always just behind him. Always close enough to influence. Never close enough to take the full impact. My lawyer, Denise, didn't waste time. She laid everything out. The phone records. The credit card statements. 5 years of documented patterns. And then, the message. Margaret's message. Printed, highlighted. Impossible to explain away. The courtroom shifted after that. You could feel it. Even the judge leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing as she read. When she spoke, her voice was calm, but firm. Mr. Cole, she said, you maintained a 5-year extramarital relationship with clear financial evidence and a pattern of deception, and your mother actively participated in concealing it. Ethan's lawyer tried to pivot. My client acknowledges mistakes. The judge cut him off. These are not isolated incidents. This is sustained behavior. Silence. Then she looked at me. Mrs. Harrison, you are requesting primary custody with supervised visitation. Is that correct? Yes. On what grounds? I didn't hesitate. Because I do not trust his judgment, I said, and I absolutely do not trust the people influencing it. That landed exactly where it needed to. The ruling wasn't final that day, but the direction was clear. Ethan would get limited, supervised visitation. For now. And Margaret? She tried something I hadn't expected. She filed for grandparent visitation rights. That hearing was worse, because this time she spoke. I just want to see my granddaughter, she said, voice trembling, eyes full of tears. For a split second, the room almost softened toward her. That's the thing about people like Margaret. They know how to look like the victim. But Denise didn't let that stand. She presented the evidence again. The message. The statements. Even a written declaration from Richard confirming Margaret had given Ethan alibis. When the judge spoke, there was no softness left. Mrs. Cole, she said, you actively participated in deceiving this child's mother for 5 years. This court does not find that behavior to be in the best interest of the child. Margaret stood up suddenly. You're destroying my family. The judge didn't raise her voice. Sit down. Margaret didn't. She pointed at me. She's taking everything from me. The bailiff stepped forward. Ma'am, you need to sit down. I'm her grandmother, she shouted. I have rights. The judge's tone turned ice cold. You had responsibilities. You chose not to honor them. The bailiff escorted her out while she was still yelling. The sound echoed down the hallway long after the doors closed. After that, things moved quickly. Ethan's visitation was set. Every other weekend, supervised. No overnight stays. No third parties present. That last part was important, because it meant one thing. No Sophie. For a while, he followed the rules. Visits were quiet, structured, documented. A stranger sitting in the room taking notes while he tried to be a father inside boundaries he had created for himself. And Lily? She adapted. Children do that. Faster than they should have to. Explaining everything to her was the hardest part. Not the court. Not the betrayal. Her. Where's Daddy? She asked one night. He's living somewhere else for a while, I said carefully. Why? Because he broke something I can't fix. Because he chose someone else over us. Because the life you knew wasn't real. None of those were things you say to a 7-year-old. So instead I said, sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt people. Daddy made a choice that hurt Mommy. She frowned. Did I do something wrong? That question nearly destroyed me. No, I said immediately, pulling her into my arms. No, baby, never. This has nothing to do with you. Can I still see Grandma Margaret? And there it was, the line I had rehearsed. The truth I had to simplify. Not right now. Why not? I took a breath. Because Grandma knew about Daddy's mistake and didn't tell Mommy. She helped him keep secrets from me. Lily's little face crumpled. That's not nice. No, I whispered. It's not. Will she say sorry? I closed my eyes for half a second. I don't know. Will you forgive her? I looked at my daughter. At the innocence in her question. At the way children believe apologies fix everything. Sometimes, I said slowly, forgiveness doesn't mean letting someone back into your life. She didn't fully understand. How could she? But she nodded anyway. Because she trusted me. And that trust, that was the one thing in my life that had to remain untouched. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, everything shifted again. Not because of me. Because of him. Ethan broke the rules. It was Lily who told me. Casual. Unaware of the weight of it. Daddy's friend Sophie was there, she said one evening. She made pancakes. My entire body went still. Who was there, sweetie? Sophie, she repeated. Daddy said she's nice. Of course he did. Of course he couldn't help himself. 5 years of having both worlds, I said. And he still thought the rules didn't apply to him. I called Denise the next morning. We filed immediately. Back to court. Back to consequences. Ethan stood there again, looking tired, defensive. I didn't know it was a violation, he said. The judge didn't even blink. You signed a court order explicitly stating that your partner was not to have contact with your daughter. I thought, that is the problem, Mr. Cole. You thought the rules didn't apply to you. Silence. Supervised visitation will continue, she said, for an additional 12 months. That was it. One decision. One consequence. One more thing he lost because he couldn't stop choosing himself. Sophie left him 3 months later. I heard it through mutual friends. Apparently, he had been telling her the same thing for years. I just need time. I'm almost ready. We'll have a real life soon. But now, there was no second life to hide behind. No comfortable middle. Just reality. And reality wasn't what she signed up for. Ethan showed up at my house once after that, unannounced, desperate. I made a mistake, he said when I opened the door, just enough to hear him. I didn't invite him in. You made 5 years of mistakes, I replied. I miss you, he said. I miss us. I shook my head. You miss having both. That hit him harder than anything else I had said, because it was true. And truth, once spoken, doesn't leave room for denial. He stood there a moment longer, then nodded, and left. By the time the door closed, I realized something quietly, almost unexpectedly. I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. I was done. And that was far more permanent. Time doesn't heal everything. That's something people like to say because it sounds comforting. What time actually does is reveal what was real, what was broken, and what was never worth holding on to in the first place. It's been 3 years. Lily is 10 now, old enough to ask better questions, old enough to notice the spaces where people used to be, and old enough to understand, in her own quiet way, that not every absence is something you fix. Some absences are something you accept. Our life is steady. Not perfect, but honest. And after everything, I've learned that honesty is the closest thing to peace you can build something on. We have routines again. Morning breakfasts that don't feel like performances. Evenings where laughter isn't followed by suspicion. A home that doesn't carry secrets in its walls. Lily has school, friends, soccer practice on Thursdays, art class on Saturdays. She talks about her day at dinner like nothing is missing. And maybe, for her, nothing is. Ethan is still part of her life. Technically, 8 hours a month. Supervised, structured, documented. Every other Sunday. A professional sitting nearby, writing notes about how he interacts with his own daughter. He pays for those sessions, $150 each time. He complained once in court. This is costing me thousands. The judge didn't even hesitate. You had unsupervised access and violated the court order within days. You will continue supervised visitation until this court is convinced you can follow basic instructions. That was the end of that. He got engaged last year. Someone new, younger, no children. Met her at the gym. They sent me an invitation. I threw it away without opening it. Not out of bitterness, just irrelevance. Margaret still tries. Not as loudly as before, not with court filings or dramatic outbursts, but in quieter ways, more desperate ways. Cards on Lily's birthday, returned unopened. Letters sent through Ethan, given back. Packages left at the door, donated without a second thought. She even showed up at Lily's school once. That was the only time I lost my composure. Not in front of her, but afterward. Because there's something uniquely violating about someone who helped destroy your life, trying to insert themselves back into it like time erased everything. I called the police, filed a report, documented it, extended the restraining order. She cried in court again. Of course she did. I just want to see my granddaughter. The judge didn't soften. You had 5 years to make different choices, she said. You chose to help your son deceive this child's mother. These are the consequences of those decisions. For how long? Margaret asked, her voice breaking. The judge glanced at me briefly. Until the child is old enough to decide for herself. That answer stayed with me, because it meant something important. This wouldn't be my decision forever. One day. It would be Lily's. Margaret lost her husband last year. Heart attack. Sudden. Unexpected. For a moment, I considered not going to the funeral. But Lily asked. I want to say goodbye to Grandpa, she said. So I took her, and I knew Margaret would be there. Of course she would be. Grief has a way of making people believe it erases history. It doesn't. She saw us almost immediately. Her face, I barely recognized it. Older, smaller, like the last 3 years had taken something from her that couldn't be replaced. She moved toward Lily, instinctively, desperately. I stepped in front of her before she could get close. Stay away from my daughter. Her eyes filled instantly. Olivia, please, my husband just died. I've lost everything. I didn't move. You lost access to her 3 years ago. She's my granddaughter. And I was your family too, I said quietly, until you decided I didn't matter. I was trying to help. You were enabling. The word landed like it always did. Heavy. Final. She started crying harder. Don't I deserve something? That question. That need to be given grace without ever having truly earned it. It used to confuse me. Now it didn't. You deserved to tell me the truth 5 years ago, I said. You chose not to. This is what that choice looks like. Lily stood behind me, silent. Watching. Learning. Margaret looked at her, reaching out slightly. I didn't let her get closer. Please, she whispered. No. That was the last time I saw her. People still ask. They always will. Don't you think Lily deserves a relationship with her grandmother? She's getting older. Shouldn't you let it go? People change. I give them the same answer every time. She deserved a grandmother who didn't spend 5 years helping her father destroy her family. She didn't get that. That usually ends the conversation. Lily asked me something last year. We were driving home from school. No music, just quiet. "Do you think Grandma Margaret is sad?" she asked. "Probably," I said. She nodded, thinking. "Does that make you feel bad?" I considered that. Really considered it. Because honesty matters, even when it isn't soft. "No," I said finally. "It doesn't." She looked at me, not shocked. Just curious. "Why not?" "Because being sad doesn't erase what someone did," I explained gently. "People can feel bad about their choices and still have to live with them." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Do you think I should forgive her when I'm older?" There it was. The future. The choice that would eventually belong to her. "That's up to you," I said. "But forgiveness doesn't mean you have to let someone back into your life. You can forgive someone and still protect yourself." She nodded slowly, like she was storing that away for later. She asked about Ethan too. Not about the affair. Not anymore. She's grown past the confusion. Now her questions are sharper, more precise. "Did you forgive Daddy?" she asked one night. I didn't hesitate. "No." She studied my face. "Are you still mad?" That made me pause, because the answer mattered. "I'm not mad," I said. "I'm done." "What's the difference?" I smiled slightly. Being mad means you're still holding on to it. Being done means you've let it go and moved on. She thought about that, then nodded. "I like being done better." "Me too." And I do. I like this life. Not because it's what I planned, but because it's real. I have a good job, a home that feels safe again, friends who stayed, family who showed up, a daughter who trusts me completely. I don't have to wonder where anyone is. I don't have to question smiles or second-guess silence. I don't have to sit at dinner pretending everything is fine while something rots underneath it. Ethan pays child support. Consistently. He follows the rules now. Because he has to. Because the cost of not following them is something he finally understands. The affair cost him everything. His relationship. His daily life with his daughter. His reputation. His freedom to make choices without consequences. Probably close to $100,000 in legal fees, supervised visits, and settlements. And Margaret, she lost something quieter, but just as permanent. Access, trust, family, all for 5 years of protecting a lie. She sent one last letter 6 months ago, about money, Ethan's father's estate. She wanted to leave something for Lily, set up a trust, needed my permission. I sent it back with a note. She doesn't need your money. She needed her grandmother to be a better person 5 years ago. I didn't hear from her again. The restraining order has 2 years left. After that, Lily will be 12, old enough to decide. And when that time comes, I'll tell her everything. Not with anger, not with bitterness, just the truth. That her grandmother helped her father cheat, that she gave him alibis, that she watched me be lied to for 5 years and said nothing. And then Lily will choose. Because that's what accountability looks like in the end. Not punishment, choice. People say I should let it go. Move on. Stop being so firm. But they misunderstand something important. I have moved on. I just didn't take them with me. 5 years of lies bought them a lifetime of distance. That seems fair to me.